We're going to wait a while so some people can hop on here. Let us know where you're watching from. Say hi. People.
Hi, Kim. Hi, Sue. Christine. All right.
Ready to go?
I think so.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have Dr. Tony with us today, and he's going to talk about fly control for cattle and horses.
Be sure that you put any questions that you might have in the comments. Today, 2 lucky viewers are going to get a Valley Vet gift card. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Tony.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Tony here. I'm the Technical Services Veterinarian at Valley Vet Supply. Today, we're going to talk about some fly control. So if you guys have any questions to get started, please let us know. Discussion rather than just me talking the whole time. If you could also put in the comments if you're here more for cattle fly control or horse fly control, and we'll kind of discuss more what you're interested in. To start with, I'll kind of do a little introduction here. Flies are pesky, they're hard to control, and a lot of times we can't really control them adequately with only one modality. So a lot of times we need to use a variety of options for optimal control. And the good news is we do have a lot of different options available and what we have for controlling these pesky little critters. So we've got sprays, we've got feed through insecticides that inhibit growth of immature fly stages. We've got natural forms of fly control for fly predators. We've got all different kinds of things that we can use. So if anybody has any specific questions about any kind of products, we could sure discuss them further. And I'd see a lot of comments coming in, so we can sure start to address those questions as we get them. Some cattle, I see one cattle for Karen, horse for Cheryl, Kathy is horse. And I guess the goals for controlling flies for cattle versus horses are a little different. Horses, you know, we really want to make sure we keep as much of the fly pressure off of them as possible for their comfort. Cattle have a much thicker hide, so it doesn't bother them quite as much, but cattle are more prone for maybe some disease transfer than horses are from the flies, such as pink eye. Anaplasmosis is another big one that flies can transfer. So for cattle, we really want to keep flies under control, mostly so that it doesn't affect production and so that we don't get disease pressure from it. So we want to keep those numbers under control, but keeping, you know, almost all the flies off the animal is not realistic. Now for horses, that could be our goal, is to try to, you know, apply an insecticide daily or every other day, or at an interval. It's required to keep almost all the flies off of the animal, and it keeps the horse a lot more comfortable. So we've got premise fly control options. We've got lots of fly traps, sticky fly traps or bait fly traps. One thing to think about though with those attractant fly traps, those big containers that have the smelly stuff in it, those do attract flies, so we don't want them to be inside of the barn or the premises because it will draw flies into there. And so we want to put those around the exterior of the pens, I guess, or around the paddocks. That way we draw those flies away from that and then end up trapping them. So that's just one thing that I see a lot of people that put those inside of their barns, and that might be counterproductive in the long term. Sticky fly traps are good to have on. They catch a lot of flies. And there are some sticky fly traps that they have patterns on them that attract more stable flies. And so stable flies can be a hard species to control. And those patterned fly traps work very well for that. So I see some more here. We got a donkey fly control with Amy. And that would be very similar to horses, more cattle, a couple more horses. So we've got a good mix, which is good. Hopefully we can have a productive discussion about some of you guys' questions today. So when we're administering insecticides onto the animal, we have different options for both cattle and horses. We've got concentrated pour-ons where we pour on kind of a small volume and we pour it down the back line. And these pour-ons, they get absorbed and they get distributed across the whole surface of the animal. And they're usually formulated to be longer lasting. And so that works well. But then we've also got some concentrates that we can mix and spray onto a horse or a cow. And it's a higher volume administration. You spray a mist over the whole animal, and those work well too. So depending on what your preferences are, if you're applying insecticide out of pasture, a pour-on down the back line is not going to work very well. So you'd want to mist them from a distance, and that works better out at that. If you've got cattle in an alleyway, then those pour-ons are a good choice because they're a little bit confined and you can get that onto them. If you're working with horses, a lot of times their halter broke and you can spray them down or you can pour them. So either one of those work really well. The mist or the spray bottle maybe works a little better because you can focus on the underside and the legs to get those stable flies under control. So I see a question from Alan that asks what makes a fly spray long lasting on horses? And so there's a lot of different factors that go into that. Formulation from the company is one. And so companies do their best to formulate these products so that the molecules don't break down over time. And the other thing is the carrier. And oil-based carriers tend to stay on the animals longer than water-based because we don't lose it to evaporation. And then it doesn't wash off quite as easy. So if the animal gets in a heavy dew or in a rain, those water-based products can wash off, whereas the oil-based products tend to stay on better. And so typically oil-based products last longer and provide a longer-term control of these flies. I have another question. Do you have any information to deter bot flies from laying on horses? That's a good question, and it's not going to be anything special because bot flies are deterred and killed from the same chemicals that stable flies and all of our other species of flies are. So you would just want to focus on a good fly control program. Now, the difference with bot flies is if you see those bot eggs, it's best to try to remove those. We've got some options for bot fly removal, but you want to try to get those off so that horse doesn't ingest those bot eggs and cause some issues down the road. So let's see. They're just
fly control for goats.
Fly control for goats. Okay. Fly control for goats, it's going to be very similar to cattle. We've got lots of different modalities and we've got the pour-ons and we've got the sprays that we can use. Insecticide ear tags are another thing that we can use in our cattle species. And I see Caden asked a question about that. And Caden asks, how well do the ear tags work? And that's a good question, Caden. I mean, they're very hit and miss in my experience. Research has shown that they do work well, and they work best for horn flies, and they work okay for face flies. But flies are known to develop resistance, and so there's a lot of resistance out there to fly tags, insecticide tags. So they can be very hit or miss on how good a fly control that they provide. Again, our goal is not going to be to keep all the flies off the animal, but if we can keep the fly numbers below a certain threshold, which is usually about 200 flies per animal on cattle, then it's been shown that that doesn't affect production at all. So fly tags do work well to keep them below that threshold. They work kind of intermittently on helping with prevent pink eye problems. So there are other better solutions if you have really bad pink eye problems. That being said, fly tags do provide a good option, I guess, to add to our other options. So like I mentioned at the very beginning, we're not going to control the flies adequately with only one modality. So fly tags plus sprays plus some premise fly control, that's going to be our best bet in attacking these flies from multiple directions. Karen asks, pink eye has been a real problem for the past 2 years. I will talk about, now that pink eye has been brought up, we've got an excellent product that mostly locally because it's so big, but we've had a lot of producers locally that have given us some really good feedback. And we have a mineral feeder with it's called a fly killer cover. And on the other side of this fly killer cover it's a felt pad, I guess. I think it's the felt material. I don't know, it's proprietary, so I'm not sure exactly what it's made out of. But you pour insecticide into a reservoir on the top of it, and then the insecticide wicks out the entire underside of this cover for the mineral feeder. And when these cattle lift the cover up, and you can use it in horses too, believe it or not, when these animals lift the cover up to eat the mineral, then that insecticide gets wicked onto their face. And that really keeps those face flies under control very effectively. It helps prevent the spread of pink eye, and it really does an excellent job. So flies are not the only thing that cause pink eye. You know, if they get poked in the eye, it can resemble a pink eye. And so there are lots of times where we're dealing more with pokes in the eye than actual infectious pink eye. Ask if there's a crossover product, one that can be used on multiple species. And there are many crossover products that can be used on multiple species. You just have to read the descriptions and what they're labeled for. But honestly, almost all of our products are safe to use on multiple species. And that includes smaller animals too, goats and sheep, and even some that can be used on dogs. So if you have any specific questions on a product, you can sure give me a call here at Valley Vet Supply, and I'd be happy to speak with you. But we do have numerous products that can be used on cattle and horses both. A comment about fly predators. They say fly predators work, but my neighbors don't clean their pens regularly, so I have to do fly traps and masks too. Yes, and that's a really good point. Flies don't stop at the fence line, and that's frustrating. If we have neighbors or a premises even a couple of miles down the road, that really doesn't do a very good job of trying to keep their flies under control. Unfortunately, a lot of that fly pressure makes its way onto our property, and that's frustrating. You know, in that case, there's only so much that we can do on the fly pressure at their place, but we can try to do our best as far as controlling the adults, and that would include sprays and premise sprays and traps like you mentioned, and those are going to help keep those adults under control, keep them repelled, and then kill them if they do make their way onto it. So that might be one thing to talk about, as a premise spray. And these are very effective because flies like to land on surfaces. They spend a lot of their time resting. And so if we can mix up a premise spray with up to 6 weeks of activity, we can spray it on these surfaces, these inanimate surfaces such as barns and stalls and stables. And as the flies land on them, then it kills them. And that can be a very effective control for these flies as well. Looking for a great working all natural fly repellent. We have several different natural fly repellents and fly control products. Um, I don't have any specific products right now. Um, you know, as far as what they are natural, we just have so many that I don't have all of them memorized, unfortunately. So I would advise you to go look into our catalog or look at our website, and there is a tab on our website under fly control for natural fly control. Um, and we strongly believe in really any product that we carry. If we didn't think it worked or we didn't believe in it, we wouldn't carry it. So if it's something that you can find, I think that it was going to work very well for you. So Angel asks, what's the best when you live around a lot of water? And that's a good question. Water makes it tough because flies love water. The reason being they like to lay their eggs, their larvae, in all these damp organic, matter in these areas. So the best thing to do, I think, on that, Angel, is going to be to maybe look into fly predators, because you can sprinkle these fly predators around these damp areas. And if you continue to add fly predators to that area every month, then those fly predators naturally kill those fly larvae and maggots. And so you're going to really diminish the population that hatches on those damp areas. So that would be my suggestion, to try to help keep those fly populations down. Sue asks, what about gnats? That's a good question. Gnats are maybe a little bit more difficult to control just because they're so small and they don't really land on surfaces very much. But our permethrin products are going to repel them too. And so just some good fly control products are going to be good for that. Gnats can be irritating because they like to fly around the face. So if you're not satisfied with the control that these sprays provide, maybe looking at some fly masks would be a good option to try to help keep them out of your horse's eyes. Christine says, I use Absorbine Black Label with UV protection. That's a good product. Are you happy with that product, Christine? And then Vicky says, how about putting this in cattle rubs in the pasture? Yes, good question, Vicky. So if you're not familiar with cattle rubs, there's a lot of different styles and kinds. The most basic is a long rope or chain that's covered in like a burlap wrap. Okay, and this burlap absorbs insecticide that's been diluted in oil. And so the cattle are walking under this or rubbing onto it, and that insecticide oil mixture gets onto their hair and where they're rubbing. So it does a good job. It's a self-application method where you can hang it in entrances and exits of the watering space or the mineral feeding space to kind of help encourage cattle to get this product applied onto them. So yeah, we have lots of different products that we can put in there, and we want to use oil-based. We want to make sure that we can mix it with mineral oil, or even some of them are labeled with diesel fuel. And the reason for that being is so that if it rains, it doesn't wash all that insecticide out of our rub. Now, we do have some products that we can put on these cattle rubs to help with face flies and help get more even distribution of the insecticide. Face flips would be one, and they're just strips that hang down and rub along the cattle's face and shoulders and stuff as they walk across it. Fly bullets would be another one that you can just hang up, and as cattle are rubbing onto them or playing with them or whatever, it gets insecticide onto them. So that would be another option. Lots of good products, permethrin-based products or organophosphates such as Coral. Those are going to be really good choices too. As kind of a side note, we do have dust bags too. They're very similar to the cattle rubs, but as they walk under them, it sprinkles dust on them rather than insecticide oil mixture. And so Some people prefer that. They both work well. The biggest thing to think about with the dust is if it gets wet, then it can clump and it may not come out appropriately. So we just need to check them regularly, make sure it's not getting clumped up, make sure it can come out, and those dust bags can work very well. You want to make sure the dust bags are low enough that the cattle have to lift them with their head, and that helps to sprinkle that dust on them as they walk through. It kind of bounces along their back and their head to help get that dust sprinkled out. Can you mix a pour-on with a spray? So a lot of our pour-ons are labeled to be diluted down into sprays. So if that's what you're asking, then yes, you can mix that concentrate with a volume of water and then spray that mist over the animal. But always follow label instructions. If it's not labeled to be diluted and sprayed, then it's probably not going to be effective. When looking for a natural fly spray, what ingredients should you look for, and what percentage should be the ingredients? That's a good question, Amanda, and I'm going to be honest with you, one that I'm not so familiar with. I don't have a lot of background in homeopathic medicine, so most of my background is going to be insecticide based. So I really don't know a whole lot about the all natural fly control. I think that the insecticides are more effective, but I understand that there are some instances where we want all natural products. So something that you could probably find some resources for somewhere, but unfortunately I don't have a whole lot of information for you on that. Last year we had a mosquito problem. What is a good spray for horses? That's a good question. For mosquitoes, there's products that are labeled specifically for mosquitoes. A lot of the same ingredients that we use for fly control is going to work for mosquitoes, but our mosquito labeled products do work better because they have additional ingredients that are added. So make sure you look for a spray that is labeled for mosquitoes, and that tends to work a lot better. Cheryl, I put mineral oil on my horse's legs for bot flies. And then the next question, oil-based burns my horses. Is there anything longer lasting but not oil-based? Yes, there are several fly sprays, and they all have different labels on how long they last, but there are definitely water-based formulations that are labeled to be long-lasting. Okay, I have some leftover cattle fly tags from last year. They're in a Ziploc bag. Do you think they're still good? Yeah, I think they're still good, Caden. I think that keeping them in a Ziploc bag was a good idea, keeping them sealed. So I think I'd feel comfortable using them on my own animals. Is there a spray you can just spray on and not have to brush in? Yes, absolutely. I mean, most of our fly control products are just spray on. So you don't have to brush them in. You just mist them over the hair and make sure you apply enough. A lot of times we don't apply enough, and that's the reason we don't get optimal fly control. So just make sure you mist it and really wet that hair coat down to try to get the best fly control. Do the fly blocks work? And by fly blocks, I'm assuming you mean the feed through IGRs. And by that, I mean the growth regulators. Yes, they do work. The way they work is the animals consume these ingredients, and what they do is they're not absorbed by the animal, and so they pass through the animal in the feces, and as the flies lay their eggs and their larvae in that feces, it's got those ingredients in it. And what those ingredients do is they inhibit development of these immature fly stages. And so you will significantly decrease your fly numbers, your adult fly numbers. Now it takes time because it doesn't kill the adults that bite the animal or lay the eggs. So it takes a generation or two to really see a difference. And then the other confounding factor is that what we talked about earlier, flies can travel long distances. So if we have neighbors that don't use it, or if we've got some pond areas or something where flies like to hatch out, then we're going to get some adults from those areas flying into our premises. Besides war paint, is there another pesticide for wounds? SWAT fly ointment is a really good ointment for areas that flies like to get onto, and it is okay for wounds. So that would be one that would work well. How do you use a premise spray when using fly predators? They say to not spray near predators when spraying horses. Yeah, that's a good question, Cindy. So you'd want to, fly predators are going to live in the ground and in those areas, and we don't typically spray our premise sprays around there. But the most effective place to spray those premise sprays are going to be on surfaces of buildings, the vertical and horizontal surfaces of the buildings. And so that's what I would recommend that you do, is to spray it on the stall walls or the barn walls. And then you shouldn't affect your fly predators at all. Okay, Stephanie says, while I despise gnats and flies, it's mosquitoes is what scares me the most around my horses. Does any of this work well on them? Yes, and like I mentioned earlier, we do have sprays that are formulated and labeled more for mosquitoes than our flies. And the time of day is important for mosquitoes as well. Mosquitoes like to come out, early morning or as it gets into the evening. And so applying those fly sprays during those times or keeping them indoors during those times is going to help minimize the risk of mosquito exposure. Okay, and Christine says, yes, she's very happy with absorbing Black Label with UV, keeps the mosquitoes and gnats and flies away. So that might be a good product for people to look into. It's gets a good positive review from Christine. What is a good mosquito water treatment? That's a good question, and that's one that I'm going to get back to you on. I don't know off the top of my head if we have any water treatments for mosquitoes. So I will look into that, and then I'll log back onto Facebook and I'll respond to that if we do. That's a good question, Christine. What product is for horse flies specifically? Good question, Cheryl. We don't have any products that are specifically for horse flies. Horse flies are just like big, huge flies, and so they're controlled the same way. Just our normal fly sprays and fly control options are going to keep those under control as well. Anything that works for ticks also. Okay, excellent question. Excellent question. I was hoping that we would talk about ticks. Our organophosphate products work the best for ticks. So Co-Ral is a very good product. It is labeled for horses, and we can mix that up and we can spray down our horses. Now organophosphates, they're a little bit stronger, and so they can only be applied a certain number of intervals. And so we have to follow those instructions and those label directions, but those do work very well against ticks. They work a lot better than our permethrins as far as keeping those ticks off and keeping them under control. What ingredients would you look for in an insecticide fly spray, and what percentage? Our most common ingredients are going to be permethrins or pyrethrins, and the higher the percentage, the more effective it's going to be. We're also going to want to make sure we get good coverage. So we want to make sure we spray evenly across the whole animal, make sure we get that hair coat kind of, damped filling. Don't be shy when using fly spray. Permethrins are very safe, and so we can sure really apply that and be okay. Now there are some other ingredients. Permethrins and pyrethrins are pretty much the same thing. There's some little differences, but one's more natural, one's more synthetic, but they're really pretty much the same thing. Now there's some other ingredients that can be added to help it as a synergist. And as you look for those products, those synergists are going to help the permethrin work better. The most common one is piperonyl butoxide. That's commonly combined with permethrins to help those fly sprays work better. So typically, as a rule, the higher the percentage of these ingredients, the more effective as a fly spray is going to work. Okay, Pamela, flies love my black cattle and seldom bother the white. If I missed your recommendations for cattle, sorry. Yeah, so some good recommendations are, I mean, we want to make sure a good way to control flies is to go after the adults on the animals. So regular fly spraying, and this goes for horses too, but spraying these animals down or applying a pour on at regular intervals is critical. This helps to kill the animal, or I'm sorry, not kill the animals, kill the flies on the animals when they lay on them and bite them. It helps to repel the flies from the animals. And if we do this regularly enough, it really keeps those numbers under control. Now we're going to want to make sure we go after the environments that these flies can lay their eggs and hatch out. So the wet areas drained, keep the tall vegetation trimmed or burned to kind of help minimize the areas that these flies can lay their eggs. Keep manure cleaned, keep wet, damp hay picked up. Spread this all out to dry so that these flies don't have anywhere to reproduce. And then some premise fly control as far as premise sprays or fly predators in confinement areas. Those work very well. Okay, let's see. SWAT does not stay in long in the heat of Arizona. War paint has a thicker viscosity and does not melt to liquid like SWAT does. That's interesting to know. We've had pretty good success with SWAT. It seems to work well. Let's see. Is there a concentrate that can be mixed with oil? All the concentrates I've seen are water mix. If yes, what oil would be best? Yes, there are concentrates that can be mixed with oil. One would be Coral that can be mixed with oil. Commonly is E-Pro permethrin is a permethrin-based concentrate that can be mixed with oil. My favorite oil is either mineral oil, or you can go to like a bulk grocery store and get large tubs of cooking oil or frying oil, and those work well too. Diesel fuel can work, but it can also burn the animals, kind of sting their eyes, and it can burn the grass too. So I kind of stay away from that personally. I like those mineral oils or cooking oils better. They work very well for that purpose. I think so far that's all we've got.
So far.
So if anybody has any questions, please let us know. And even if you think of them afterwards, type them in, because I'm going to go ahead and log in, and I'm going to respond to that mosquito one as far as dunking it in the water. And if you have any other questions, then I can sure respond to those as well. So thanks for all the good questions, guys. Like I said, if you have any questions at all about anything, I'm here. So please give us a call and ask for me, and I'd be happy to speak with you about anything.